Hello everyone, welcome back to EOSIP YouTube channel. If this is the first time you have landed upon my channel, welcome. If not, welcome back. Okay, today in this episode, I'm going to share with everyone one of the most asked questions that I get from my clients, which is be it if you are newbie investors, I think it is more applicable to those who are newly invested into properties, who are a new landlord, new landlord to be. They would be wondering most of the time, should I rent out this rental properties long term in fully furnished or partial furnished or basic furnished, or some call it unfurnished. Okay. So today I'm going to share with you what are the pros and cons when it comes to renting out each of this version, as in fully furnished, partial furnished or basic furnished, and then as for myself, which are the one that I prefer the most, and what kind of properties would be more suitable for the kind of for you to choose whether you want to rent it out fully furnished or partial furnished or otherwise. So remember, whatever that I'm sharing is purely based on my own past experience as an investor, and also from the feedback that I have gathered from my clients, because I'm also a property agent. There's no right and wrong in it, so it's not iron casted or what. It's just purely my sharing. You can use it as a guide, but of course, if you have got other alternative ways which you think that has worked for you well, you're also welcome to share and put your comment down here, so that every one of us could learn from each other. Okay, so today, let's say you have newly bought into a new residential rental properties, and you plan to rent it out for long term, but you're not very sure whether should you rent it out fully furnished, or partial furnished or unfurnished. Okay, for myself, I still recall the first time I invested into a property. My first investment property or rental properties is actually a high-rise condo in mainland. I first rented it out fully furnished. Why? Because I used to stay inside this unit, and then eventually when my parents need to help me to take care of my daughter. Back then my daughter was still very young, a toddler, and my parents told me that they prefer to stay in landed. So I actually moved out from this condo and moved into a landed property, and then that's the reason why I rented out this condominium fully furnished. From the experience that I gather is that usually if you were to rent out your properties, rental properties fully furnished, okay, when it's still brand new, you are able to get the maximum rental. Let's say that time my condominium unit, the unit that I first rented out, when all the furnitures are still pretty new, okay, I could rent it out around 1,500 per month. In mainland is considered quite good, right? Usually for long-term tenancy, it will be minimum a year, right? So usually after 1 year, the tenant would have moved out, and then when the new tenant move in, your furniture would have gotten older, right? And there will be some wear and tear which will be visible to your next potential tenant. So usually the tenant would negotiate down the rental. So from 1,500, it actually went down to about 1,350. And then, as you could guess, as it went on, eventually the rental would even come to about 1,001. Okay, due to wear and tear in the furnishing that is provided inside the rental properties. So, and what I gathered from my experience is that when you rent out your unit fully furnished, you tend to get call from your tenant over the span of their tenancy, like sometimes when the heater break down, or when the washing machine break down, or any of the furniture that you furnish inside broke down, they would expect that you would have to help them to rectify or repair it or replace it. So when you rent out your rental properties long-term fully furnished, you have to expect that there will be more maintenance on your side. You will have to respond to the request from your tenant more, and you have to put in more effort and time to manage your rental properties, be it to help your tenant to get contractor to repair, or to get a replacement for the for the furnishing which has broken down due to wear and tear. And of course, if you have been a landlord before, usually for fully furnished tenancy, there will be a clause to say that, you know, if should the furniture break down, if it's due to wear and tear, of course it will be at the sole landlord's responsibility to replace it. Or if it's due to malicious damage caused by the tenant, then the tenant would have to bear. But then again, when it comes to practically, how do you really differentiate whether your washing machine, for instance, broke down? Was it due to wear and tear, or was it due to the malicious damage by the or carelessness by the tenant? It's very difficult to actually draw a line. So best, usually I will advise my client, my landlord, is that just put a clause to say that any repair or replacement of furnishing above $100 ringgit Malaysia, thereafter the replacement will be on a sharing basis. Sharing basis, usually you would have to be 50-50. Okay, and then this, of course, this clause you have to inform the tenant upfront when they sign the tenancy, or even way before they sign the tenancy, before they agree to rent your unit. Okay, so as you can see, practically, if you were to rent out your rental properties fully furnished, in one word, you have more headache, and the rental yield may not be very high. Maybe at the very first year it will be high, then subsequently the rental yield will actually be on a decreasing basis, right? Then comes to partial furnish. Okay, over the years, after I have been landlording for past more than 10 years, right, through the experience that I've gathered, I prefer to rent out my property now partial furnished or basic furnished, or some call it unfurnished. Okay, but depends on the type of property. If today the rental property that I bought is a high-rise condo, usually I would have to put it partial furnished. When I say partial furnished, you may be asking, so what kind of partial furnishing are you providing? Usually for myself, I would provide furniture which is cumbersome for the tenant to install it on their own. Like, let's say a kitchen cabinet, I would make sure that my unit comes with built-in kitchen cabinet or ready-made kitchen cabinet. Is up to you. Okay, and I would also make sure that I install aircon, you know, because aircon in Malaysia's weather is a must, I would say. Aircon, you know, and of course the ceiling fan, grill, water heater. Okay, so this will be the partial furnishing that I will provide, including including the curtain. Okay, the curtain can be custom made, or it can be those that is already ready made. Usually for rental properties, I'll just go for ready made. It's way cheaper. Okay, and that means for high rise, from my past experience, now I prefer to rent it out partial furnished, and that's the reason why. From my experience, I realized that whenever my high-rise rental properties is being rented out partial furnished, the turnover of tenant become lower. What do I mean by that? That means that this tenant who rented my high-rise, which is partial furnished, tend to stay longer. I have got one unit where the tenant already stayed there for 6 years. Brand new studio unit, he moved in. I rented out partial furnished, and it got rented out 1 week after I make my unit to be partial furnished, ready for rental, and he continued rented for about 6 years. Okay, until he moved back to KL. Versus my fully furnished condo, usually the most is 1 year. After that, the tenant would have moved out. So after that, I realized that, hey, when I have a partial furnished condo, I tend to attract tenants who plan to stay there for years, like more than 2 years, 3 years, medium, do we call it long term? Yes, for long term, okay, more than a year. Okay, but if I fully furnish up my unit, okay, I tend to attract a tenant who the most they will only stay there for 1 year, some even 6 months only. Okay, so which one do you prefer? Do you prefer to have high turnover of tenant or low turnover? Of course, for me, I prefer low turnover and less less maintenance needed at my side. Okay, because partial furnished, usually kitchen cabinet, you don't hear much from the tenant to say that, hey, your kitchen cabinet has broken down, right? The most aircon is that before they move in, you got to service your aircon, make sure that the gas is at full. Thereafter, when they stay inside, should the aircon gas run low, they have to service it on their own. All this will be worded inside the tenancy agreement. Okay, so now come the best part. Basic furnished, or some call it unfurnished, because you have to see, you cannot be renting out your residential rental properties totally unfurnished. Unfurnished means even without lighting, without grill, without ceiling fan, those basic stuff, it must be there, right? It cannot be like when you get the key from the developers and they really give you an original unit without any lighting and all that, just have the wiring for you, waiting for you to go and install all those lighting and ceiling fan. So in the market, whenever the tenant said I'm looking for an unfurnished unit, actually they are referring to basic furnished. And for my side, I also prefer to rent out my rental properties basic furnished, but only for landed property, okay, and not high-rise, because from my experience, I get to experience, if I were to rent out my high-rise unfurnished or basic furnished, it takes longer to get a tenant to come in. Why? Because usually a tenant who would rent a high-rise like condominium from you, they are usually not local. When I say not local, doesn't mean that they are not Malaysian. They are Malaysian. Not local, that means if let's say my rental property is based in mainland, that means they are not from the state of Penang. Probably they are from other state, but they are Malaysian. Okay, tenants who are from other state but they are still Malaysian, they tend to have the preference to stay in gated guarded community like condominium, because they feel safer, probably because they are not familiar with the place that they are staying in. Probably they just got posted or relocated by their company from KL to Penang in mainland or in Penang Island. That's why they tend to prefer to stay in high-rise or gated and guarded community. But if I were to invest in landed properties, most of the time the tenant that I tend to attract are local. That means if my landed property is in mainland, the tenant that I tend to attract are people who work in mainland, people who are familiar with mainland, or probably they are from mainland. Some could be they just newly married, so they want to move out from their families and form their own family, and they prefer to stay on their own, and they prefer to stay in landed property. Yeah, this is my top favorite. Why? Because basic furnished, or the market call it unfurnished, is totally zero. I would say almost 99% zero maintenance. The tenant will not call you at all unless if there is structural problem with your property. Okay, so on my hand, I have rented out landed property to local tenants. They can stay there for years, more than 5 years. As long as you don't sell, they continue to renew their tenancy from you, and the payment tend to be good. Okay, but of course you still need to do the filtering lah, where I did share how do you filter your tenant in one of my videos. If you guys are interested, I will put the link below. You can click down here and check out that video. Okay, so if you guys have watched until this end, in conclusion is that for myself, from the experience that I've gathered for more than a decade, I always prefer to rent out my high-rise rental properties long-term, partial furnished. But if it's landed residential, I prefer to rent it out unfurnished or basic furnished. Okay, I get the highest rental yield, and I has the least amount of effort or work that I need to do. Okay, and what I need to do is just wait for the property to appreciate in value. As everyone knows, it's a general knowledge that property tend to appreciate in capital value over time, right? So why we want to rent out our properties, because we are also buying time to make sure that over 5 years, 10 years, our property from 200 become 400 and become 600,000. Okay, it's also a good hedge against inflation for our money, our hard-earned money. Okay, so that's it. So this is my sharing from my past experience as property investors for almost more than a decade, and also feedback that I gathered from my clients. Okay, if you want to rent out your properties, always rent out partial furnished if it's a high rise, or unfurnished if it's a landed. Of course, there is no hard and fast rules about it. What I'm sharing is not iron casted that you have to strictly follow by it. Just use it as a referral, as a guide, and then find your own liking as to which are the ones suit you best. Okay, and of course now we are coming to the month of end of March. That means when it comes to April, that will be income tax filing month for those who are a salaried person, okay, salaried worker. So if you need to start to do your income tax filing and you're already a landlord, you're not very sure what are the things that you can deduct from your rental income expenses, I did a video on how to file your rental income, where I'll also put the link down here. Feel free to check it out if you are interested. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching until the end. Okay, bye bye. I'll see you guys again. Yeah.